Two.
Check 1 2. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it looks good.
Sweet.
Okay. That's our backup audio feed in case this one craps out. It's
Okay.
only happened once or twice, but all right, looking good here. And we'll start in 5, 4. It is the 200 level, episode 342. Mike Carpenter with the long-awaited return. We were actually talking about this. Isaac Ambrose is back. Hi, Isaac.
It's so great to be back.
And we figured out when it was. It was the Chattanooga game in March of 2022.
Yes, 2022.
2023 was Arkansas. So
Yep.
there was that fateful Friday night when Coleman Hawkins saved the season for another 48 hours. And then you got a gig with the DIA. So that kind of complicated.
Yeah, no, so that took me out of the picture for a little over a year. Awesome experience. Now I've taken a different job elsewhere, not in sports. But then on the side, I'm helping out Jeremy in Illini Inquirer, which has been awesome.
Sweet.
Doing some of their social media content stuff, which I think if we're better at this year, like we've been in the past couple years, should be a pretty easy job to make up content and that sort of deal. Would have been a lot more difficult a few years ago, I would say.
Absolutely. I wonder how they did it in the doldrums of the John Gross and the Tim Beckman and then the Lovie Smith era. And, we used to do the daily radio show where we would find our way to 3. I can't believe we did a 3-hour show for that long.
Yeah.
Especially Lon and Jeremy did every day. And then we did the split in 2-hour radio shows. It's hard enough in the summer when there's not Illinois sports, but even when there are, you can only complain so much before you start feeling like you're being redundant about it. So it's such a far cry that, I told listeners a couple podcasts ago that October of 2022, last October, when Illinois went 5-0 in football, or 4-0, I guess that month, was the most listened to month beyond the Illinois basketball run to the number 1 seed, the Big Ten title and all that. And I think that just speaks to, you're going to see this too working for Jeremy. Like, when they are good, your job is not only that much more fun, but in a way consequential because you got that many more eyes and ears on it.
100%. And being at DIA and working in social media, it's slightly different, right? Because you're not trying to get more subscribers. You're not trying to reach the masses and the Illini fans. A lot of people just come to you for stuff. But a couple of the sports I worked with, right, they were very low in the Big Ten standings. They weren't having great seasons. And no matter what you do, the ratings, the engagement, yada yada, it's all going to be super low. And then you could put out a picture of poop, but they just beat Iowa on New Year's Day like the women's basketball team did, and it's going to blow up. It's going to explode. So kind of like what you're saying.
Was that the tweet? Just a picture of a
think
turd
it
on
was.
the court?
Yeah, I think it was.
Well, wasn't there something that Illinois basketball did or football? They tweeted and then they took it down when it was considered to be like unsportsmanlike.
I think it was 21. It was either the 21 or the COVID year when they tweeted at Nebraska. So we beat Nebraska, and they were like, "Hey, thanks for bringing football back," because they were like a big part of bringing us back.
Yes, that was it.
COVID.
It was the COVID year.
So I remember like talking to a few people about that, and like, we're just, I guess Illinois is not that type of school. Like you'll see a lot of like SEC schools do that, and
which
like
I think
smaller
is
schools.
fun.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. We're just, we got, I wouldn't say higher standards. I would just say.
Well, I do think Illinois is in this unique position because as I was talking with Jeremy about this, it occurred to me mid-conversation, and I'm an alum, and so there's this kind of like pride that goes beyond the I already was because I was a townie, and I was into the sports, and then you're an alum, and it occurred to me that in my lifetime, and I'm 36 now, that there's never been this much of a feel-good aura, not just of your revenue sports, in my lifetime, because I was too young to remember the John Malkovich and Lou Henson late 80s, early 90s. So that was really good. But also the administration. So Josh Whitman, of course, I think we'd agree is there is a certain level of comfort knowing that he's the guy in charge. He's not going to really screw anything up. I think he's proven that.
Yeah, 100%. I think, too, knowing that his background is – because he was a lawyer or he has, like, a law degree or something
So
important.
a lawyer, law degree, lawyer, AD at Wash U in St. Louis, the D3 school.
So he's not going to make a snap decision. He's not going to do anything crazy like that. And, technically, I guess he was my boss for, like, a year. But I never – he always seemed to have his stuff together. I mean, whenever we'd have, like, big meetings or whatever, he's just such a – prominent figure, I
And
guess.
a presence.
But, yeah,
there is an intangible presence to him.
100%. He always says the right things, and I think you do have to give him a lot of credit because I think a lot of athletic directors have screwed this up, and a lot of commissioners have
Northwestern.
Right, yeah.
Well, that's an egregious case, but yeah.
And then commissioners, right, like the Pac-12 commissioner, how bad he's screwing up this conference realignment right now. Like Josh has been such a, I say Josh like we're on a first-name basis. He's been just at the forefront, it seems like, of NIL and of these other things that if we would have had, like one of his predecessors, or excuse me, one of the ADs of the past, we might still be in the rearview mirror of a lot of these other schools. But I think right now, and especially Illinois, like for the amount of success we've had just in this short little time compared to some of these other schools that we're comparable with NIL and things like that, I would say a lot of that is thanks to Josh Whitman, and thanks to, some of the higher ups that have been progressive about NIL and that sort of thing and not straying away from it. The gambling thing is a little bit unique to me and kind of seems like doesn't really make sense. But
in his defense of that, though, because would I like to bet on Illinois sports? Of course.
Yeah, because you think you have like an inside.
Yeah, I know more about them, and I do really feel as if last year, had I been able to, I'm not a good gambler. I'm terrible at it. I will put more in my account and try it again football season.
Yeah.
But then you see what happens at Iowa and Iowa State.
Yeah.
And you get to an extent. Now, I don't necessarily think that Josh Whitman's insistence that Illinois law says you can't bet on I don't know if that really would dissuade a college athlete at Illinois from gambling if they wanted to. However, it's at least, I think in his mind, it's giving off the right appearance.
You're definitely
being proactive,
You're definitely making it harder for him. I mean,
sure.
Think about there's a lot of, like you just said, you'd bet on Illinois probably if you could here
every game,
but you're not going to drive to Indiana and bet on them probably.
No.
Just like the student athletes, it might, persuade them to not, which they can't bet at all, I don't think, on anything.
No, I don't think so. I think that's part of the deal. And Illinois now, I think the number 2 gambling state in the nation behind New York.
Well, we were one of the first ones, I think, to have, like, where you could bet on your phone. I know Indiana was too, so doing something in the Midwest, I guess.
Yeah, it's fun, though. Do you gamble?
Yeah. I used to a lot. Like, I say a lot, like, I was super into, like, listening to podcasts, reading short articles, like, hey, I'm going to throw $5 on, like, the Yankees.
Monmouth versus.
Right. Yeah, right.
I got a friend who bets on all the obscure stuff, and it's based on tips. And he actually has a friend in Vegas who is a professional poker player.
Okay.
And every now and then his friend from Vegas, and my buddy, if he's listening, he'll get a chuckle out of this, but he will get, tips from his friend. Hey, this, what's the boxing? Not boxing, but UCF?
UFC.
UFC.
Yeah.
Okay. The 5th undercard of a UFC Saturday night thing. Hey, put $1,000. I'm like, this guy's a high roller.
Yeah.
Now I feel bad if I lose $5.
Yeah.
But I am excited to get back to it, though. And, if we were able to, when I was in Michigan, for example, visiting Kara's family, 2 years ago, I put a futures bet on Illinois to win the Big Ten championship. The year that they actually did win the Big Ten championship. Problem was, I did that the week before they ended up losing to, what was it? The game before Kansas State, where we were just miserable watching it. Cincinnati and the bad. Marquette game before that.
Yeah.
And I immediately took the bet off the table. So that was $250 or whatever just waiting for me there.
Yeah.
We're going to focus on Illinois football today.
Awesome.
And before we get too far into it, I'm going to hit the sponsors.
Let's
that's
do
okay.
it. Yeah.
Now, DP Dough, classic sponsor of the 200 level. They're entering, I think, their 17th year on campus because they were there in 2006 when I was there. Order online at dpdough.com for all the best deals and prices. That's dpdough.com. Also, State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com for life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it. Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well. Do you remember the domain name, Isaac?
Brian is my guy.
That's right.
Right, yeah.
Trevor's favorite person.
Yeah.
I need to get him back on this. He's busy with the
Super
Field
busy.
of 68.
Yeah.
And Jeff Goodman, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Also, we have Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing. Give them a call at 217-841-4728 for all your HVAC needs. It's coming up in that time where you might need a furnace check. And we need to schedule ours coming up here in October or November before you know it. So Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, that's 217-841-4728. And finally, Owen Builders, LLC. mutual friend, one of
Yeah.
your good friends, right?
Luke, what's up?
Yeah, Luke. And these guys are tremendous with home additions, patios, decks. So what you can do is go to owenbuildersllc.com, get a gallery of the things they've already worked on. They work in Champaign-Urbana and the surrounding area. That is Owen Builders, online at owenbuildersllc.com. And, of course, Champagne Showers Podcast Network. Appreciate their partnership and appreciate you listening and ratings and reviews, all that jazz. Illinois football. We could talk Illinois basketball, but I figure you shelve it.
We got what 4 months still.
We got a ways.
Talk about it. Yeah.
1 to 10 scale. Where are you on the excitement meter? I'll just give you my number now.
Okay.
You give me your number and the reasoning behind it. I'm just going to go a solid 9, without trying to be too hyperbolic. But I feel like I'm underrating some of the risk or concerns with this team. So where are you?
Yeah, I would say like 7.5 or 8. I'll start off with the lows, or like why I would be a little bit pessimistic first. Obviously, the unknown of a lot of positions like defensive back, quarterback. I mean, we got lucky with Tommy DeVito, but Altmaier could be like any of the other transfers we've gotten in the past, 10 or 15 years. So that's scary. I would say the schedule is difficult at times. But I remember at the beginning of the season last year thinking like, well, Wyoming's got some studs, or Chattanooga's got a couple guys on NFL radar. So.
I remember thinking before that Chattanooga game, and then you won 33-0.
Right.
One of your better performances. Yeah.
I guess that's the other thing too. Is like last year, a few games into the year, especially after the Indiana game when they had those dominant performances like against Virginia. You knew that the defense was going to play well, so you had that to fall back on. This year, it's not. I guess I got to see it a couple times maybe. We know the defensive front's going to be awesome, so those question marks and then the schedule, like Kansas, I mean, that's not an easy game. I do think I feel a lot more confident about that now, and considering how last year went then. Because, I mean, all those games with Lovey, like those away, like South Florida, those like away non-con team.
That was a Friday night game, if I recall. It was miserable.
Bielema's first year at Virginia, right? Like these random non-con opponents. And, of course, you schedule this when Kansas, I don't think they won a game a few years ago.
Same with Toledo.
Same with Toledo. They're projected to win the MAC, yeah. So I would say those things concern me. But then on the flip side, the reason I am giving it like a C+, B minus, which might even be a little low. I'm excited because I think number one, it's really the staff and like the coaches and like what Bielema proved. And I was thinking about this today. The first year Bielema was here, we had those games that went south, and a lot of it felt like in-game mistakes, right? Last year was more so like games just got away from you. The offense couldn't figure things out. Your special teams was terrible, and it was less Bret Bielema maybe making a mistake like he did at Purdue 2 years ago. Like
being way too conservative,
right?
At the end of the Maryland game.
Yeah, and I remember in those games, and I think probably talking to you after and just being like, okay, Bielema's he clearly knows football, but like maybe he's out of touch with the college game, yada, stuff like that. So
I had concerns like that too.
Yeah, so knowing that Bielema's legit, knowing that you have, I think Aaron Henry's. I mean, he's at least been surrounded by great defense, right? It's not like you plucked him up off the street or from some random school. I think Lunney can only go up from here. And I think he might have mentioned this with you, sort of, when you don't have a guy like Chase Brown, right, you're forced to go like so many different directions. And I think you see that a lot in the NFL, right? Like these teams, for instance, like the Tennessee Titans, they have Derrick Henry. And I know Chase and Derrick are completely different players, but the Titans are like, okay, we're going to feed him. We're going to feed him. We're going to feed him.
Over-reliance.
Right, but then they might not throw the ball to guys like A.J. Brown, who's now with Philadelphia, or Treylon Burks, who's a rookie or whatever. So, like, now it's like, okay, I liked what I saw from Pat Bryant last year. He made a few big plays. Like Isaiah Williams, I think he got the ball a decent amount last year, and it still wasn't enough as he probably should have because you have guys like Chase. And the running back, I guess, is also another concern because...
Oddly enough, though, I would agree with that. Reggie Love, despite not racking up a lot of yards in the bowl game, there is a steadiness about him, and I almost chalk up that performance more to kind of a troubling deficiency with run blocking. It seemed like Mississippi State's defensive line actually kind of had our offensive line's number.
Yeah, they did.
That surprised me. But you're right. Let's focus on the running back thing because and I want to not rescind, but amend my 9. I mean, like a 9 is if we're literally looking at the Big Ten favorites. This is the year it's all coming together,
Returning
right?
everybody.
A 9 would have been where I was at when Io and Kofi decided
Yeah.
to come back another year,
Yeah.
right? Not quite a 10, and that was a lot to look forward to. So all the concerns, and let's start with offense, specifically running back. You know, this idea of a Thunder Lightning kind of combo with Josh McCray and a Reggie Love, my concern is not with the Reggie Love. My concern is with the Josh McCray.
Yeah.
And the weirdness kind of surrounding the injury last year, and how the coaching staff continues to say all the right things, and they've bought enough cachet where I tend to believe them. However, just the elusiveness of why is he hurt? Why is he not playing? And then almost these little hints that were being dropped that, well, he is healthy, but you know, mentally we just kind of got to get him back into it. Not that that's you know, crazy that someone would have to kind of get back in mental game shape as well, but I thought, well, maybe there's something more here that's keeping Josh off the field. That is my concern. That's short of Reggie Love, who I think will get you 700-800 yards, no problem. He's not going to be able to be a 1,600-yard workhorse like Chase Brown, but if there is a flip side, as you were talking about, it will be less of an insistence on having to run the ball and more of a, well, you got Isaiah Williams, a Pat Bryant, Casey Washington as a third down outlet. I would say the improved wide receiver room gives you a little bit of a cushion if the running back situation's in flux.
And I do think, too, your offensive line, returning most of them and, you know, guys with NFL potential, it might not matter, hopefully, who you put back there. They might be able to get 700 or 800 yards, like you're saying. But and I know Chase, like we're saying, it could flip, right? And you got multiple guys. We don't feel like we need to force feed him the ball, but then it's like, okay, do you have a guy that's 75%, maybe a Chase, or 60%? And it's easy to forget. I don't know why McCray, I know we're not talking Illinois basketball, but it makes me think slightly about Curbelo freshman year.
I thought you were going to say Austin Hutcherson.
No, but like,
I get that though. That's actually
huge
good
freshman year, and then I mean Curbelo. I know he had those concussions, whatever. Him and McCray, different year or different reasons for having such a weird sophomore year. But it's like, okay, is Josh McCray really like that guy? And like, I think he is. I mean, he's built like an NFL running back. But even his freshman year, he got hurt a handful of games. Like, you can be a stud, but if you're only going to be there like 5 or 6 games, then, you know, we can only use you so much. And then it's hard for other guys to get into the flow of things.
The Mike Epstein effect.
Yeah, 100% awful.
Somehow that guy darn near rushed for 800 yards. There was a post from Mike Pearson who does these Illini Legends list and lore, and it was happy birthday, Mike Epstein. And whatever the yardage total was, it actually shocked me because I only remember about 3 games he played in, and he always got hurt. But whenever he was out there, including I think that USF game,
he was. Yeah, he played well. I think he
was
got
really
destroyed,
good.
But and then when you played him at Soldier Field,
was he good in that game
and
too?
I think he played well then too. But
I was on a run a couple days ago, and a name popped in my head. MJ Rivers.
Yeah.
And the reason it did is I was running past Illini Inn on 4th Street, and if you recall, there was a Saturday night game against Western Illinois at home.
Yes.
It was a rainy Saturday.
Wide receiver got hurt.
Yeah.
When he had that amazing catch. I forget his name.
Same with me. I forget his name,
Yeah.
but I think MJ Rivers was the starting quarterback. In that
he
game.
was.
And USF at Soldier Field the week before or after, but. Yeah, so the running back position to me, the other thing, and I think we're going to use the word either take solace or comfort in, and usually will be in reference to Bret Bielema and his track record. And that is one of those, okay, if they did not make a point or an emphasis of going out there and getting a running back in the transfer portal, which they have shown no problem going out and plucking different guys, especially D-backs and offensive line help, by using the portal, then they must feel pretty good about it. The other thing with the running back position, and I don't want to just say anybody could, run behind a good offensive line, which I think Illinois' offensive line, while not great, should be very good, a 7 out of 10, which can win you games. Then I'm wondering, or I should say interested in what a Jordan Anderson or an Aiden Lawfrey can do, because those names kept on popping up last year, and they didn't play, and for good reason. You didn't need them, and it was the stretch run with Chase Brown. But I would like to think that if you got a good enough line, you can really just find someone that'll scat their way through it. And but then again, are we underrating a 1,600-yard rusher in Chase Brown? What I don't want to do, Isaac, is I don't want to do the whole thing I did before Illinois basketball last year, where I said, well, It sucks to lose Kofi.
Yeah.
But, because you played – but also you played through Kofi, so maybe you were kind of hamstrung based on how good he was or what he did. I don't want to fall in that trap, but I think Bielema's record with running backs suggests they'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. We just don't know exactly how it's going to look.
I mean, every time – most years he was at Wisconsin, the running backs – I mean, I think he made a lot of running backs a lot of money because how good his offensive lines were. I mean, think about – so I think he's second. There's that graphic they always put out. He's second when it comes to offensive line draft picks behind Nick Saban. But I'm sure – I don't know this for a fact. If you take out the 5 stars, the guys that Nick Saban recruits out of high school that could go right to the NFL, the number's probably closer. Bielema might be first.
Yeah.
So I think guys like Monty Ball and Melvin Gordon, I mean, they're great running backs, but a lot of times they were just cycled through at Wisconsin. And I know this is going to be Barry Lunney's offense and going to be a little bit different, but I do think that offensive line comes from the Bart Miller, Bret Bielema type thing. And like you're saying, you can't just put Joe Schmo back there, but you're hoping that a lot of these returning offensive linemen can help higher the ceiling. But I get what you're saying with the whole Kofi situation, because it's like, well, we can replace Chase. Last year we just knew, to a fault, like Kofi, we knew, okay, we're going to feed it into him. He's going to get fouled. Like, it limits our potential because we don't have shooters. We're just going to keep doing that. With Chase Brown, you're going to give him the ball on that annoying sometimes RPO 10 times in a row on the goal line, and you don't get, like, you get stopped. Like, you higher your ceiling because you know you're going to get a few yards every play, but that's why, like, for instance, your red zone offense was so bad last year. That's why kind of shooting was so bad when Kofi was here, because you didn't need to shoot as much, but you also, like, you really lowered your potential, and we saw that. That's what happened.
It's a weird formula to try to figure out. Like, you lose the biggest impact player, and yet what they were good at, did that limit you in other areas? I think the wide receiver room is one area I'm taking. I won't say solace. Actually, genuinely excited about in a way, because you mentioned Pat Bryant, who in the first half of last year looked the part and played the part. I really think through the first 6 games, he looked like, damn, this kid's going to be, I don't want to say, he has this look to me that just takes me back to the 01 team. And you were a young whippersnapper back then, but we're talking the Brandon Lloyds and the Walter Youngs. He looks and plays like a wide receiver. Isaiah Williams is like a Swiss Army knife.
Right.
That happens to play wide receiver.
Right.
Pat Bryant looks it. So between those two, there's one other name that I'm oddly excited about. Who do you think I'm going to say?
Are you going to say the freshman?
I'm not going to say, because
okay.
We all are, right?
Yeah.
Excited because of his reliability. I have these thoughts on my runs. I'm like, okay, who's going to do what?
Yeah.
And it's been Illini football centric recently. Casey Washington, I think, will have about 700-800 yards this year.
Yeah.
I think that for a young quarterback like Luke Altmaier, you want that safety blanket. Now, the obvious choice is Isaiah Williams, but I think in first and second downs, you're going to get more usage from him.
Yeah.
Third down, you kind of got to go with the old reliable, right? And whether that's a little 8-yard curl or an 8-yard slant or out, whatever that may be, the bowl game gave me a lot of encouragement, and actually the last few games of the season, that Casey Washington, who had shown those flashes. I mean, think 2 years ago at Minnesota, he had that amazing catch, that dime from Peters to him, one of the few big plays of the game. I really think that he's got the stick him on his glove, so to speak. I think that gives you a great third option, and then that's the kind of position where you mentioned the freshman. You can get a random impact player, though it would not be random if a Wiltshire or an LZ had a big year.
Yeah, Case Washington seems to just be like around the big plays, like you just mentioned Minnesota. He caught the ball against Penn State in the 9 overtime game.
That's right, yeah.
And he caught the slant, one of the last few plays in the Wisconsin upset a few years ago at Memorial Stadium to get you in, field goal position. And
he was on that team.
Yeah, he was a freshman. I'm like 99.9%.
I think you're right.
Sure.
And this is his fifth-year COVID.
Right. So, yeah, he's definitely got the ability. I do think with Peters and just the past few years, he has got a little just mixed into things and maybe like swept under the rug. And I don't think the coaches are ignoring him by any means, but I think he's got the physical attributes, and he definitely seems to have the hands. So it'd be interesting to see him take that next step. And see who's gonna be the next big playmaker, if it's gonna be him or Brian or
I would assume Bryant.
He made some huge plays last year. I remember, I think it was Minnesota last year at home,
Mm-hmm.
you went down because Minnesota almost took the kickoff back. So
That's right.
Minnesota scores. A few plays later, Tommy throws him a pretty deep ball around the left, down the home sideline. He catches it. And I remember thinking, like, dang, this dude, he's got great hands, too. He doesn't just have the size. So
I feel like that was his last impact game.
Yeah,
hit a freshman or sophomore wall. His first year playing time.
I mean, you didn't really. After that, which big throwing games did you have?
You didn't
know?
really, and I went back and actually looked at that thinking, well, there has to be a correlation here between you started losing those games, the offensive numbers had to go down. I don't think the offensive numbers in terms of total yardage or anything went down, but the efficiency did. The running game became predictable.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, you had to start throwing the ball 35, 40 times a game, which was not the way that they wanted to do it. Tommy DeVito, I think the most yards he threw for in a game last year was Michigan State.
Yeah. And that
but
was, yeah.
A lot of those were late. I mean, there was a late drive that probably padded another 50 yards in the stat
And I think
sheet.
Isaiah had like a quick or like a slant that he took like 60 yards or something. He had a deep pass touchdown too in that game.
Yeah, a game we could you see this,
Yeah.
and we're gonna go kind of position groups that we either have concerns or we're excited about, and then I want to get into the more macro, and we'll talk about the intangible factors of this team that I'm really encouraged by. But with the wide receiver position, this will lead us right into quarterback. The one thing that gets me most excited about this season is the little nuggets that have been put out there from Isaiah Williams, whether it was at media day or after one of these practices, and the coaches to an extent that they are not saying that Altmaier is going to be Tommy, and none of us would expect that. However, much as I love Tommy, much as I'm sure you did and most Illini fans, he's got his position secure in Illini lore for being a one-year guy that helped bring us back.
Yep.
There were limits. The deep ball was one of them. When he got hurt in the Iowa game, the mobility went away.
100%.
And that killed you.
Yeah.
And if there's two things that Altmaier can do, he ain't going to throw for 70% like Tommy did in some games, and that's okay. If you can deliver 2 or 3 deep balls a game that Tommy might not have been able to, like the throw that not haunts me, but you were there for the bowl game.
Yep.
Isaiah Williams, 25 yards down the field, that would have put you in position to milk the clock and win it, right?
Yeah.
Because you're up 12-10 at that point.
Yes, you're right. And you or yeah, because they kicked the field goal with like 3 or 4 seconds left. There was only
They
a few
did, and then there
seconds
was the
left,
weird play where they got the late touchdown, which was
And then
just
there was
salt
a
in the
fight
wound.
or something.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
that
That was
not a great
weird
way to
game.
end the season.
I do specifically remember I was sitting in like the southwest, whatever was like the opposite cat corner of the pirate ship, and I had a perfect view of it because it was like on the 35 or 40 or whatever, on the opposite side.
The throw to
And
Isaiah.
You saw.
Oh, the
you
separation.
Saw it open. Yeah, Isaiah was wide open, and yeah, that definitely limited you last year. And I don't think like in the moment as much like during the season I thought about it. One, because your quarterback play had been so bad, like leading up to Tommy, and two, because things were just working. Like he was kind of just doing what he needed to do. He really didn't make that many bad throws, bad plays, except I remember like once I think against Virginia, and then
There was a couple interceptions late. I mean, it was all November.
Yeah.
October was about as flawless of
Yeah.
a month, and the Minnesota game was the peak of that.
That was
where
awesome.
He was just incredibly efficient. What that was, I think, part of was his experience, his ability to deliver short and intermediate routes, no doubt. And you didn't really have many deep plays. Even that Minnesota game where you had the ball
No.
for 40 minutes. The reason why I'm overall a Lunney fan is we saw the ability in that game and through the month of October that they can sustain drives without the big play. Like he was playing close to the vest almost, not getting too weird and only playing to his strengths, and yet was still able to do something with it. But I also want to be careful too here because I don't want to do the Chase Brown thing or the Kofi thing from a year ago and think, wow, I mean, Tommy was okay, but no, Tommy at times was great.
Yeah.
But I do think if you look around in the Big Ten West, where I believe every team has a new quarterback. And it might be a Cade McNamara at Iowa. He's more proven.
Yeah.
The Wisconsin guy whose name escapes me.
Malachi, the dude from SMU.
Yes, that's right. And they got another transfer quarterback as their backup.
Yeah.
And they might very well be better.
Yeah.
But
it's Mordecai, not Malachi. Sorry.
It's Mordecai. Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
But all that is to say that, we don't need Luke Altmaier to be an all Big Ten quarterback.
No, yeah.
You really just need him to deliver the occasional deep throw and manage the game when it comes to these longer sustained drives that I think at times were Lunney's specialty. So again, it's not a small question mark.
Mm-mm.
The guy's only played a couple games at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
However, I just get the feeling that they wouldn't be planting these little nuggets like this is the best quarterback room situation we've had here, or I know that they're talking more about the depth of that position, but I can't help but think they would not say that if they felt like Luke Altmaier wasn't actually going to be a pretty serviceable Big Ten starter.
No, yeah, and I think there are a couple other positions that they haven't been bragging about, right? That you maybe they do have question marks about, and like they've brought in a good amount of depth, like at the defensive back and stuff, right? And they have a handful of transfers there, and that might be because they are a little bit concerned. So just knowing that you haven't heard anything bad, and I'm sure something by now would have probably come out or reports that he was getting picked off a bunch of times in practice. You'd think somebody would have something to say about it. But yeah, I don't think you don't need Luke to be great. And again, our bar is so low here at Illinois. Like, just don't make the dumb plays. Just make as many right plays as you can without throwing interceptions and hit the occasional deep ball, which we haven't seen. And I'm really, like, my lifetime, the last guy that could really hit the deep ball, I know Westland had an arm.
He was a sitting duck back
yeah,
there.
exactly. So it's like there a lot of guys can throw it deep, but how many guys can make the right decision, constantly be efficient? I would have to say Shieldhouse. I might be wrong, but even he was more like a mobile guy. Obviously, Juice
More of a DeVito than a deep ball guy.
Obviously, Juice could throw it. There really haven't been a ton of quarterbacks in my lifetime that could zip it down the field, but coming from Ole Miss, I mean, that's top of the top. It's a lot better than if he was coming from like Kansas State or Iowa State or something like that, So
he's a righty, isn't he? He's a righty.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
I think one thing I was just thinking of, because the offensive line, the left side of it's going to be tremendous.
Yeah.
And the right side, they're going to shuffle some things, and your center is probably going to be Josh Kreutz.
Yep.
And I think that will work out fine, though, of course, you would have taken the guy that went to Auburn and felt a lot better about it.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that his blind side should be pretty well protected. I think that they will do things. If the offensive line, for whatever reason, is not able to really hold up the way they want it to, he has the mobility, which is a blessing and a curse, because the more you do it, the more likely you are to get hurt. But I think you can still do it in a way where it's effective and not really hang him out to dry. I overall, with the offense, in terms of expectations, last year they finished 91st in scoring offense.
Yeah.
I think you can and should improve on that. And if you don't, you might have more questions about Lunney. It's year 3 with Bielema, year 2 with Lunney. I don't think this team, though, will have a problem moving the ball. And then the other factor that we briefly touched on, or you did, was just red zone. If they clean that up, they're winning. If they clean up the red zone thing, they're winning 8 games somehow, some way this year. If that's a recurring issue, we'll be pulling our hair out, Lawrence, Kansas on September 9th or whatever it is, because then we'll feel like deja vu all over again. But I think if they rectify that, then the offense will be fine. And I don't think you need it to be more than just fine.
I do think that I've heard you say a few times in the past few pods, like you were closer to 10-2, right, than 6-6. And I think if you were just slightly better at the red zone, I mean, you would have beat Indiana, you would have
Michigan. Well, how many times did you get in the red zone against Michigan?
Yeah, the Michigan one was iffy. Let's see. I was at a women's basketball game in the second half, so I didn't get to even watch it. But
lucky you.
I did see the very ending. They put it up on the big screen, but I know because Chase had like a rushing touchdown,
a great 35.
But that was outside the red zone.
I forget how else you scored in that game. I was so tightly wound.
Was it Michigan State too? I think you had a couple chances you might have blown.
Well, right in the start of the game.
Yeah, that's right. Because maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Maybe Isaiah took it downfield and got tackled, and then you didn't.
Something like that.
Yeah.
You got within the 20. I mean, it was right in front of my dad and I where our seats are, and you're thinking, oh, we're going to smoke these fools today. Because I think Michigan State had a pick. Or, actually started off with a pick in the red zone.
Didn't Sydney? Yeah. I don't know.
And then we weren't able to convert. We got stuffed on a fourth down and thinking, you've got to be kidding me.
And you hope that the offense can – I mean, that's why it's so important to have a guy like Pat Bryant, right? You can throw it up to, and hopefully a guy like Tip Ryman. I don't know how high he's going to be able to jump, but the tight ends have done pretty well here for Lunney the past couple of years, so maybe keep that up.
I love the sort of drag routes they did a few times last year. There was one at Nebraska in particular, whether it was Ryman or Ford, that worked out really well, and it was almost as if to their credit, as an offensive staff with Lunney and then Bielema, I'm sure having a big hand in it, they were adapting. I didn't get the sense so much that they were stuck in their ways. I get the sense, if I were to be an apologist, or I want to be careful with that because they had their issues too, and Lunney admitted that. But I really do feel as the season dragged on, they felt like the best way to win was to still play close to the vest because of the limitations that they had. I think you saw in the bowl game, I remember getting really frustrated and thinking, why aren't you going downfield? Why aren't you going downfield? And when they did, they weren't able to get anything done. So what do you do at that point?
Yeah.
Now, you could run into the same situation unless the personnel is that much better at doing the things that you want them to do. We'll be saying some of the same things mid-season where we got frustrated with Barry Lunney's play calling. But upon reflection, I don't know how much of that was play calling and how much of that was, okay, these are the tools in our toolbox, and they can only get us so far. And that's year 2 of a program and still trying to figure things out.
And this might be ridiculous, but we're playing a lot of like hypothetical or trying to project things.
Hey, it's August, man. It's all about hypotheticals.
With the defense, I mean, odds are they're going to take a step back, probably even a couple steps back, because for so much of the season you were number 1 in the Big Ten and like scoring and everything. So you wondered, like a lot of times in offense, they kind of complement the pace of the defense, if you will. So I remember Minnesota Bielema's first year at Minnesota, you won like 14-7 or 21-7 or whatever.
Oh, it was you won by more than a touchdown, so I want to say like a weird one, like 17-7, 16-7.
But remember, you was scored immediately,
right?
And then Minnesota couldn't score because your defense was playing so well, and it's like you just completely took your foot off the gas. And it felt like that last year a couple times where you started off well, you maybe made some plays, and then you kind of didn't blitz, or you were becoming really conservative, or you, for instance, knew that your defense was going to bail you out, which happens so many times. So I'll be interested to see your defense, even if they're like middle of the pack, the offense is going to have to step up a handful of times. A lot more than they did last year. So it might be that sort of catch-22 where, yeah, your defense takes a few steps back, but maybe Lunney is forced to open up the playbook more, which I do think worked a lot of times. Like you were talking about the tight end play. There was a couple plays where the tight end would kind of like sneak out like from the backfield or something, and he would be unguarded, and then he would score.
Easy 15-yard scampers.
Yeah, so maybe some things like that will sort of open up.
I think there's a way that they can do the things that worked with Tommy last year, the easy routes. And is Altmaier going to, again, be completing them at the same percentage? I don't know about that, but I do think that you can, especially early in games, kind of get them warmed up. I don't know how. Heck, it wouldn't surprise me if in the Toledo game, within the first few throws, they say, okay, Luke, take one. It'll be interesting to see how they decide to grow this kid's confidence. Not that he lacks it, but as far as in-game confidence, there's just not a lot of tape on it.
And you know what's one thing I forget that I literally just thought about? Like, the main thing we compare him to is Tommy, because he was at a different, bigger school. Ole Miss bigger than Syracuse, but transferring in, we really just want him to be a game manager. We knew Chase Brown was going to be good last year, right? Like, the one difference, it'll be a successful year for Luke if he just makes, the occasional play and doesn't make a bunch of stupid plays that cost you games, right? Because you got him for at least a couple more years.
Which is that is the most exciting part to me. Would I take Hudson Card for this team? Of course, because you feel like it's more of a given. However, how many more, given your team makeup and the blueprint with which Bielema teams tend to win, I don't know, would you be in that much better of a position as a program with Hudson Card 1 year, Luke Altmaier 3? And without trying to talk myself into it, I think that immediately after the Hudson Card thing, and we were texting each other when this all went down, we're like, oh, of course, Purdue. Because if he didn't go to Purdue, we wouldn't care.
Oh, no. Huh?
Right, but he went to Purdue, so we're thinking, you've got to be kidding me. A month after Walters gets the job. But as the dust kind of settled on that, I thought, you got the longer-term option here. And there's a chance that he was, under Lane Kiffin, where there are plenty of good quarterbacks that want to play for that guy. He just kind of toiled in the second position, losing to a pretty good quarterback. And I don't know, man. I'll take the SEC guy. Sometimes it's just as simple as that. If you're good enough to be the number 2 guy in an SEC team, you're probably going to be okay to be a number 1 under Bret Bielema in the Big Ten West.
Yeah, and like kind of like what you just said, like, would you rather have Hudson Card this year or Luke in a few years? So you're kind of playing the long game there, which a lot of times you don't get
I
with
feel
transfers.
better. Yeah, I feel better going into next year where you lose some really key guys, no doubt. But
Yeah.
then the more I look at the roster, I think there's a lot of sophomores in the 2 deep. There's a lot of juniors in the 2 deep.
Yeah.
And if you bring back a quarterback and you feel good about him, and you bring back most of your wide receiving core, and I feel like Altmaier gives you a little bit more of a pathway to not feel as if 2023 is some one-shot kind of deal, which I don't think it is.
Yeah.
But we might have had more of that, oh, boy, if we can't win this year with Hudson Card, we're losing everybody next year.
And the transfer portal changes that. I think Bielema changes that. A lot of the recruits we don't even think about now, which, I mean, guys like Jeremy, they do all the analysis or whatever, and then you don't really even find out if your analysis was right for a couple years because it takes guys, especially these 3-star guys, right? It takes some time to pan out. But that's why it's so important for Bielema to have these recruiting classes, because when Johnny Newton leaves, when Keith Randolph leaves, Isaiah Adams, all these guys, you might not have another NFL talent right there, but you might have a guy that's sort of been behind them, been molding. So then when 2025 comes or whatever, you're not completely screwed there. So that's we go back to like the Bielema helping make us more confident and everything. That is such a big part of it. I do think he knows who he wants. I think the staff knows who they want to recruit, and that just makes it so much better off than in past when one guy's gone down, and you've just been such a drop off, especially in the trenches where I think that's so much more important. You can kind of mask if a wide receiver goes down, if a corner goes down, but if you have guys in the trenches and it's just a complete drop off, if a guy like Johnny were to get hurt, that's where I think having somebody like Bielema is so important, because then in 2025 you still have hope.
Sure.
Yeah.
So would we agree that we only really need the offense to be fine to good? Or do you have a little more of a, come on, show me something, Barry?
I need to see the Kansas game, because I think Kansas will have a pretty good offense. Their quarterback coming back, Jalen Daniels.
Their defense should stink, though.
Yeah, their defense will probably be bad. That's why I'm saying, like, if the offense, like, I don't know how much.
But Indiana's defense stunk too, and on that fateful night, that's why.
Well, their offense was bad too, and you made them look decent. It was a weird night. Yeah.
Hey, there was something that I thought was pretty cool, and it's the kind of thing that gets you excited as an Illini fan. It seems, when I was talking to Jeremy, I told him it's like everything that Bielema does. I'm like, oh, he's so smart. And I want to I want to caution myself because, he's not infallible. But this thing that they're practicing more at night because they know that their first 2 games are 6:30.
Yeah.
I bet you that game week they're just gonna. I wouldn't be surprised if they practice 6:30 every night under the lights, Memorial Stadium. Just get ready to go, so that when their internal all this sort of gamesmanship, all the detail-oriented stuff he does is not all that different from the fact that Hayden Fry wanted to paint the opposing locker room pink.
Yeah.
Meaning that this is one more anecdote about Bielema that I really appreciated. When they went to Wisconsin last year, that week, he talked about how he talked to them about everything about Camp Randall, everything to expect. Now, I'm the kind of person that maybe it's a control freak thing or something, but I like knowing where I'm going. When I get there, I can kind of relax, but I kind of like to have an expectation about what is this thing going to be like, and then mentally I get ready for it. So that last year was just indicative of the fact that he will do everything he can to just make sure his team, when it is time to kick it off, they kind of know what the score is. They know where they're going to be, what they got to do, and all of that. And this practicing at night thing, first, why would you do that? Oh, okay. And then, is Toledo doing that? Maybe. Is Kansas doing that? I don't even know who Kansas is playing week 1.
I couldn't tell you. It's probably like Southeast Texas A&M or something like that.
We'll get to the schedule in a bit, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that is huge, and those probably just a handful of things that Bielema has picked up over the years that is so helpful. I mean, learning from Belichick, learning from Alvarez at Wisconsin before he even took over. A lot of things like that, I think he's picked up, and it is the little things like that I think in college football. I mean, I'm 25, so these kids that play for Illinois and play college football, they're not that much younger than me. But just think about how even the littlest thing could set you off mentally.
Yeah.
So like kind of what you just said, knowing like, okay, this is what's coming. Okay, we're gonna get ready to play at night. Because if you're practicing it at 8 a.m. and it's 90 degrees in Champaign, and then you're playing it Friday night, and the weather's different or whatever, like the littlest thing I think could throw off 18 to 22-year-olds, and I think Bielema knows that. And my favorite thing about Bielema, besides those little football guy things, like practicing when you're going to play, which makes 100% of sense. You just don't really
It's
think about
it's
it.
not a genius move,
No,
but I don't know how many people do that.
Yeah, and I think Bielema just seems like such an honest guy. And for instance, I remember after the Michigan game last year, he was frustrated too, right? Like in the moment about the non-call offensive pass interference and a couple other plays here and there. But then he also wasn't coming out and saying that it was completely not our fault, right? There was like the Michigan State Purdue games, right? Like after the press conference, or you're listening in the press conference, he's not filling you up with crap. He's not saying, we played great or this and this and that, but he said like, hey, I promise, next week we're going to be more physical. We're going to do this and that. And I remember that after the Purdue game, him specifically saying like, we're going to be better next week. Like, we know we're going to the big house, this and this and that. And they did. And they could have won that game.
I remember when I was listening, that was one of the worst days of my life. So I've lived a pretty good life. But that day sucked, did it not?
It was so cold.
It was so cold and
Yeah.
miserable. And it was just like, just win. And I know we're going to Indy. And God, But I remember listening to that, just being the sports masochist I am. I'm like, let's tune into the press conference.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, big house, whatever. We're
Right.
going to get our asses kicked. But no, we didn't. They actually, in a way, that game at Michigan, despite not getting the win, was, I think, a really good barometer of, okay, this is how I can feel when this team inevitably loses a disappointing game. Now, it happened to be 2 in a row, and then it happened to move to three in a row because Michigan was able to overcome it because they were a freaking college football playoff team. But that team remember Michigan's opening drive that game? They basically went right down the field.
Yeah, it looked like it was going to be over.
It could.
Yeah.
I thought it was done, and then the game kind of settles in, and you're like, "Oh wait, we're actually going toe to toe with Michigan in a non-fluky way." So, it's those things. It's the preparation. It's the fact he calls Toledo the MAC champs, which is just the kind of sometimes coachy stuff drives me nuts. Like that, Pat Fitzgerald, maybe not a good example, but he could have done something like that, and I would have rolled my eyes.
Right.
But I do think, as you mentioned, there's this. I'm not crapping you. I will occasionally do some coachy stuff.
Yeah.
But there's an authenticity that I sense from him that makes him, I don't know. He's obviously, for those who listen to the podcast, he's got a lot of credibility in my book. I freaking love most of what he does.
I mean, his assistants even, like, I know we talk about it a lot, like people bring it up, but like just the amount of credibility in like places that his assistants have been. I mean, Bolin was with the Cardinals, the new outside linebackers guy, right?
We
forget about him, right? Like, I mean, Andy Bood, who's just a linebackers coach, right? He was a D coordinator.
Finellis is a younger guy, but it
younger
makes sense why they
guy.
brought him.
I mean, Bart Miller's had some great offensive lines.
Leonard just chilling.
Yeah, right. And like just another guy that's just on staff. And then Bielema's obviously been all over the place and had such good experience. But it's just that culture, I think, that a lot of those assistants have, and they're all great interviews. Like you had Lunney on, it was a great, like, I think it's just the type of person that, I mean, Aaron Henry was on.
Aaron Henry's a star.
Yeah, awesome. Just a great to even listen to. I think all those guys are like Bielema, and they know what he is and what he wants, and I think that's huge too. That it doesn't seem like there's any bad eggs or whatever. And granted, I would have said this last year probably before.
No Garrick McGee's.
Right? Yeah. And it's been interesting too now that Walters and Corey Patterson and Kevin Kane, those guys have all left.
Yeah.
Because I probably would have said this last year too.
Oh sure.
So it maybe I'll be taking back my
but
words.
You reloaded. It wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, Lovey was a really the complete opposite end of the spectrum. But like when Kenyatta Hudson is your best defensive assistant and your son is the freaking linebacking coach.
Yeah,
far cry from
no
that.
reason to be there. Yeah.
Let's hit the defense real quick.
Absolutely.
And to me, it's a really simple equation. Your lack of experience in the secondary may not be fully overcome, but will be greatly helped by the fact that your front, let's call them I'm going to call the D line your front three, and your outside linebackers, because God knows if Akis or Coleman's going to be coming in any particular place. So those 5 guys up front, and then Tariq Barnes is a huge return. He's back, right?
Yeah.
We never talk about linebackers.
I know.
Oh, wait, okay, C.J. Hart's not here, but Tariq Barnes is.
Yep.
I know linebacking is a position where you're kind of thinking, huh? But that's your number 6, and then you're going to have 5 DBs. All that to say that it just seems as if you have the ability to overcome the inexperience in the secondary. And the fact that they went out and got all these options, of course the secondary is not going to be nearly as good as last year. However, in the bowl game, you didn't have Sidney. You didn't have Devin Witherspoon. And I mean, what I liked about that bowl game, and I think the value in a Chase, Sidney, and Devin Witherspoon sitting out, was all the experience that it got for a lot of guys. But I was really king on the secondary against a pass-happy Mississippi State team. They did pretty good.
I don't think Quan Martin played either. Or
I
did
forget
he?
it. I think he did.
I know Kendall did.
And Kendall did, and of course that helps too. But again, that's 2 years in a row now where you've had, and that's not to slide on Kendall, who I think did end up with the team.
Yeah, with our Commanders.
And of course, Kirby Joseph is killing it.
Yeah.
But it just seemed that is the magical position where whoever you put in that free safety slot is going to get, well, there's 5 interceptions for you. Now, there's the concern, Matthew Bailey in the boot, though they did say some encouraging things yesterday about that. He is a key guy, no doubt. But despite all those questions and all these new toys, I know they will take the occasional lump, and that's scary in the first 2 games with good quarterbacks. But the front 5 could also maul the quarterback and put them out of the game before it becomes not trying to make light of an injury thing, but like they will get to the quarterback. We know that.
And I mean, before Bielema got here, Witherspoon was an afterthought. Quan was kind of like written off. I feel
he had a couple bad years. Quan Martin.
Yeah. So did Kendall Smith. I mean, and even Sidney. I remember Sidney like made some big plays. I think as a sophomore when he went to the bowl game with Lovey. But there was even that season where I specifically remember him getting tossed over and like him not. So
in dirty plays,
right? So who's going to be like? I mean, we have a lot of guys back there, so hopefully one of them's bound to step up and be that next. I mean, it'd be great if one of them was the next Witherspoon, but at least those guys were besides the freshmen, they were in the building with 4 guys that are on NFL rosters, and you have Aaron Henry. So Matthew Bailey thing's a little concerning.
He's big,
yeah, because he played so well in games last year. And you hope, because he missed a few games last year, I think, with injury.
He played all 13, apparently.
He did.
He did, and I think it's really just been the spring, and then now with the boot, they say the boot's coming off in the next week or so.
Maybe I'm thinking of the spring game.
He did not play the spring game.
Right, okay.
And, Taz Nicholson, he was injury-prone at the end of last year. You hope that gets better, too. I forget if he did or did not play in the bowl game.
I don't think he did, but I know that's one thing I don't think people talk about enough is that Taz missed like the last few games of the year, and that was huge because teams, they're not going to throw at Witherspoon, so they're throwing at some of these backup guys. And specifically, I remember a few times, like against Purdue, I don't know if he played against Michigan State, where you could have used your number 2.
He got hurt in the Michigan State game, I recall.
Yeah, and it was early on, right?
You know what's so weird is before that Michigan State game, we were all feeling our oats. I mean, we all thought we were going to win that game. We're going to be 8-1.
They had like 8 guys out.
I know. And I talked to Taz's grandpa.
Okay.
And he listens to the podcast sometimes, so shout out if he's listening now. But we had a great conversation, and of course, I'm extolling all the virtues of the Bielema era, which I still believe in. And he said all the positive things about Taz's experience, and we talked about how Taz had kind of quietly just gone under the radar, and understandably, but that he's a really good quarterback. And then that game, I remember when he got dinged up and got taken off, I thought, what crap luck.
Yeah.
But that's it. I mean, for the defense, I mean, again, it's kind of like we talked about the running back position. We talked about the offensive line. The defensive line is going to be spectacular. But Bielema's teams, they play good defense.
And we haven't even mentioned the transfer from FIU. I think he was a freshman All-American.
He was, and he's just not really. He's in the 2 deep mix. I mean, that just tells you that what I really appreciate about them, they knew, okay, we're losing 3 D-backs to the draft.
Yep.
So let's replenish, and replenish they did.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the kid that was Oklahoma or us, there's a couple kids that chose us over Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I forget. You see,
yeah, I know. If this was another year, we'd think like, oh yeah, I know that guy.
this
right
is
away.
why listening to Jeremy and Joey is a good idea because football recruiting, I'll be honest,
Yeah.
other than some big names, it's just hard for me to. That may change now that we're having more success, but
it's crazy. Like just Jeremy and Joey, like I'll be a lot of like what I do is like cutting up the podcasts and stuff, and like they'll just be naming guys left and right and like recruits in like the class of 26 and stuff like that, and I'm just like, how do you guys do this? But they would be the ones that it's probably not the best that I came on after Jeremy because he knows the whole depth chart pretty much, but he's just great at what he does and knowing the roster and everything.
it's his job and he does it well.
Yes, yeah, but no, like totally, they're just bringing in guys that, and I think in other years I should know the FIU kid's name because I mean, essentially, you think about how good of a year Gabe Yakis. I don't know. I always
Akis.
Akis. I always overthink. His last
you know
name.
whose name I have a problem with is Aiden Lawfrey.
Lawfrey, yeah,
Or Laffer.
it
It's
looks
not
like
Laffers.
Laugh, or is it?
It looks like Laugh.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking Lager. It's the
Yeah.
GH that I know it's not Laugh, so that's throwing me off. So I listened closely to Jeremy and Joey. Lawfrey. Aiden Lawfrey. The Lightning to Jordan Anderson's Thunder, perhaps.
Got it.
In future
Hopefully.
years.
Okay, so I'm going to call him Gabe. So Gabe had a great freshman year at the defensive end position, freshman All-American. So essentially, this kid from FIU had as good of a freshman year as Gabe
Sure,
did.
yeah.
So and now he's going to be back there. I know Nicario Harper, forget where he transferred
Louisville,
from.
I think.
Yeah,
Or he was at Louisville, maybe transferred somewhere else
Yeah.
before, but he had a good year there. I think that with this, and by the way, with Akis, here's my trick. Before even seeing his last name,
yeah.
in my mind, listening to Jeremy and Joey, I thought Akis, and then I said Ackas.
Yeah.
Akis. So when I saw the jersey with a J, I was like, okay,
Who's that
whatever.
guy? Yeah,
I already had the
yeah.
silent J was ingrained in
Yeah.
my mind. I don't want to keep you too long, so let's talk
Yeah.
macro.
Let's hit it.
Two things we're going to do. One is talk about the intangible quality, which I'll mention in a second. Then we'll finish up just looking at the schedule, doing a little fun game like Juan and I used to do, Dare to Dream.
Awesome.
All right, the intangible thing that I am most excited about, why I don't think this will be a 2008. For you, you're a younger fan. Was there any season that you look at in particular that was a disappointing follow-up? 2008's the obvious one, but you were a younger fan then.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can we qualify 2011 after 2010 because you started 6-0 and then you lost 6 in a row?
I mean, the
or-
main one that comes to mind is the year after the Rose Bowl, just because you only won like 5 or 6
won
games.
5 and 7.
Yeah, and I remember
Which the cruelest thing about that was in 2002 you did the same thing after the Sugar Bowl, and it was the worst kind of deja vu. Thinking we got our coach, no, we don't.
I will say when I was that young too, so I'd have been like 10 or 11. The losing to USC as bad as you did almost lowered my expectations for the next year.
You
so
were smart.
That might have helped a little bit.
It didn't do a damn
because
thing for me.
It'd be different if you like barely lost or like even would have won that Rose Bowl. Then
Yeah.
then you go 5 and 7. But still, you had guys coming back and Juice was back and that was the first one that comes to mind. But Bielema, I mean, you've broken you beat Wisconsin, right? You've beaten some teams that you haven't beaten. You got back to a bowl game, so you're hoping that he's the one that can follow up a good season with another at least average season, which would be 6, going to another bowl game. It just does so much for the school, for the town. You're getting Illini fans from all over the country to go to Tampa, Florida, or San Francisco like a few years ago.
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
Would you be, because this is where I think we assumed we were going last year.
Yeah.
Would you be okay? Let's say this team 7-5. Actually, 8-4 would still get them down there because I think Iowa was 8-4.
Yeah.
Music City Bowl,
Yeah.
New Year's Eve. Would you be happy with that?
That'd
I
be
would
awesome. That'd be I mean,
I'm fine with that.
I've never even been to. I've been like around Nashville, but so going to Nashville would be awesome.
It is fun. Despite sometimes a place gets all this pub and you think, it can't be that great.
Right,
It's
right.
probably a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
It actually is a super fun town.
I mean, you were in Tampa. There was a ton of Illini fans there.
Tampa was great.
Imagine how many more Illinois fans will be there if you could drive like 5 hours, right?
Oh,
like
25.
Yes,
25,000.
tons. I'm sure there's a lot of Illinois
Living
fans
there.
in Nashville, right? So that I would be, and if that is like your average year, is like, oh, we're going to Nashville, the Music City Bowl, like we're gonna play.
Iowa's down year.
Yeah, exactly.
They freaking went 8-4,
They had
right?
the
Didn't they?
worst offense I've ever seen. Yeah.
I mean, that's a credit to them for sure, and I do think that it shows you there is a way. There's a
Yeah.
way to do it without being a sexy football program, and in terms of 40 points a game and all that.
Right.
So the intangible thing that I'm thinking of is this team, the coaches and the players are all saying something similar. There was a common thread when they addressed last year, and it's not the 7-1 start, and it's not 8 wins, which for you and I, no matter how you get to 8 wins, even with a disappointing finish, 8 wins is what we've often talked about. Oh, I'm in hog heaven. And truly, I was for the most part last year. They weren't. And while you and I can sit here and talk about Music City Bowl, and I genuinely would be excited about that, they are not thinking that. They're thinking, no. The way last season ended, this is what we're going to do. Yeah. And I love what Isaiah Williams said at Big Ten Media Days. Paraphrasing here, he said, we got the best of both worlds. We got the chip on our shoulder from the way we finished last year, but we also know that we can beat anyone that we play. And I think there's enough veterans on this team that can carry the disappointment of last year along with the, oh, yeah, we can beat anyone from last year, and that they can hold those two truths at the same time and actually use that to their benefit. So the intangible thing that I addressed in the first pod back and why I am very high on what I think, I never played football, so I can't pretend to know anything about it. I got to think out of all the team sports, the mental edge is that much more important in football. You hit harder, quarterbacks focus that much more. You're just that much more in tune to every single play on the field if you have that lingering chip on your shoulder. And I think that will help this team.
And to intangibles, these guys, a lot of them didn't grow up Illinois fans, or like all they do is think about Illinois athletics like we do, right? So they're not thinking about the last time that they went to a bowl game and then screwed up the next year. And I think Bielema seems like the kind of guy that's not going to let them think like that. So a lot of these guys, most of the guys in the program now, besides I guess a guy even Kate, like we just mentioned, Casey Washington's freshman year, they at least went to a bowl game. But most of the guys on the roster now, they weren't around when it was really, really bad, right? Like, so they've got,
which is kind of good.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because even Bielema's first year, you go 5-7, but it was a very competitive 5-7. It wasn't, it was arguably better than Lovey's bowl game season, but you only won 5 games.
Did it feel to you like you're still kind of exercising the demons of disappointments in the past?
100%.
With the 5-7, that if that same team were playing this year, which I know this is a weird hypothetical, but they get the same schedule and they are 2 more years removed from the Lovey toxicity, that given this schedule, that team would find their way to 7-5 and they wouldn't screw up as much as they did. I say that, and it's very abstract and kind of vague, but it just seems like the mental component, I don't worry about it with this team.
Right.
In 2008, I mean, in addition to Ron Zook, there were good things about Ron Zook, but a good X's and O's coach, he was not. A good game day coach, he was not. I don't have those concerns with Bret Bielema, and then I also think that they have a pretty good handle on how do you keep that locker room all pulling in the same direction.
And I think, too, last year, like the games that you had shortcomings and then ended up losing, Michigan State, Purdue, those are the two big ones because obviously what could have been. I think that might have been more of maybe your offense like slacking and not living up to expectations and putting the foot to putting the gas all the way to the floor, whatever you want to say.
Yeah,
I think that was more so what caught up with them, and less like, hey, we're big, bad, and mighty. We don't need to play as well against Michigan State, or we don't need to play as well against Purdue. I think it was more so, you're going to have a few games where you play above like how good you are, a few games below, and then, like 6 of the games or whatever are at what you should play at. And I think the Michigan game, and then, I don't know, maybe like the Minnesota was good, but you just really dominated them, even if the score didn't show it. So, like Michigan, that game, a couple other games, right, you just dominated. Maybe
the Nebraska game was worrisome for the first quarter, and then you just kind of quietly did your thing. Lunney did mention something, and maybe Bielema said something similar this offseason, but Lunney in the interview tried not to say that, well, we lost our edge. And he's like, well, and then he tried to walk it back a little bit, almost like thinking, well, did we lose our edge, or was it just a lack of focus? whatever it was, I mean, if I'm as a fan feeling as high as I was at 7-1, and God knows I was. I mean, I'd forgotten what it felt like to have a really good team.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking, oh, well, I even said on the podcast, and damn it, like if a few bounces would have went the right way, I might have been right. But I said, they're going 11-1, they're going to Indy. Not even 10-2. I said 11-1. They're a team of destiny now. Just watch them play. They aren't losing another game. And you could have made the argument that, well, they actually, not that they were closer to 11-1, but it could have happened.
It could have.
More likely that than 5-7 or 6-6 would have been. So let's talk schedule.
Yeah.
What I did in the first podcast back was I broke it down to 3 quarters. So we're going to do 3-game chunks.
Got it.
Now, the first 3 games are pretty big. And we'll talk about, let's do this in 2 ways. Let's do, instead of best case, worst case scenario, let's go with what is the reasonable prediction for those 3-game stretches. That is Toledo at home, 6:30 kick opening weekend. Then you have Kansas on the road Friday night, 6:30, so 2 straight prime time. And then Penn State the following week, big noon Saturday. In those 3 games, what record do you think is reasonable? Or do we say likely or reasonable?
I think if I have $100 I have to place, I'd say you're going 2-1. And then if I didn't have to bet on it, I would probably say 2-1. I do think there's a path to you going 1-2. There's no way you go 0-3, but I do think there's a possibility if you're still getting your stuff together. There's not going to be national media being like, oh my gosh, Illinois, they had a great year last year, and then they lost at Kansas and to Penn State, which a lot of people are high on Penn State this year.
Sure. You know what? I'm not as more because of the James Franklin effect.
Yeah, he's got a ceiling, seems like.
It seems like the 9-3, 10-2s, which is great, but despite all the 5-star kids he gets, they don't, obviously, this is not a crazy statement, they don't scare me like Michigan or Ohio State. Damn, you beat Michigan at Michigan. You mentioned 2-1, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
And I also think, let's say hypothetically, where does that loss come from? Well, of course, the likely answer is Penn State at home. But we also know that football is, and then under Bret Bielema, it's not been entirely predictable apart from one thing. They tend to play well after losses.
Yeah.
And when they lost 3 games in a row last year, it was especially shocking because after that Wisconsin game in 2021, you actually won every game after a loss.
Yeah, that's right.
Up until that point. So if you were to lose to a Kansas, I wouldn't necessarily go into that Penn State game thinking, we're so screwed. We're 1-2.
Yeah.
I would actually think, what the heck? Well, let's see how they respond, because I wouldn't be surprised if they came out with an extra day of rest also. They came out incredibly focused, the same way that they did after losing to Indiana, now Virginia last year, not Penn State. But you could tell that team was not going to lose that game. It kind of galvanized them. I would like to think they don't need that early season loss to galvanize them, but I could also see them starting 2-0 with a fun win at Kansas. And then, Penn State's they're going to get their top 10 team coming in this season, according to polls. I don't know if I buy that, but sure. 2-1, we'd both be happy with, right?
Oh, yeah, especially if it's like a close loss to Penn State. I mean, if we would have beat Indiana last year, I think I would be more confident about beating Kansas this year. It just almost feels like deja vu.
It's like, not this again.
Right, exactly. Again. So, but I do think, kind of like what you're saying, if we somehow lose to Kansas, I feel weirdly better about beating Penn State.
Yeah, it's weird.
I can't stop thinking, though, about like the Minnesota game last year at home. I know Penn State would be different, but just so electric, right? You're 7-1. Tailgating was the best it was probably all year. That and the Michigan State game, but the Michigan State one obviously didn't go as well. But because it's big noon kickoff against Penn State, I believe. Like, just the atmosphere is going to be awesome. And I just really hope you beat Kansas, because even if you lose to Penn State, we'll at least have that awesome tailgate. Hopefully it's a beautiful, like 70, 75 degrees. It's just it's fun to think about, and then how great you'd feel being 3. That seems like that would be, I guess, granted, you beat Penn State a couple of years ago, but that year you didn't end up making a bowl game or anything. Bielema needs to, the more he stacks like these bigger wins that you need, like the more he's going to cement his legacy, and people are going to start to take gravitate more towards Illinois, and I think that Penn State win would be the next step in that direction.
That would get so many, anyone that's on the fence, and I understand going 1-4 at the end of last season, There's a reason he didn't sell 15,000 season tickets.
Yeah.
Now 10 is still pretty impressive, but there's still that faction that is thinking, yeah, I'll watch. I'll go to the lots. I'll just stay in the lots. Even some of my friends are still in that.
Mm-hmm.
You beat Penn State. Now you have a hot ticket in town. 2-1, let's go with that, because I actually do think that's realistic. Another thing I was thinking of is the Kansas game. There was this kind of Bielema revenge tour thing last year, where any team they lost to the year before, they performed really well against on the whole. Purdue being the exception there. And the glaring exception. But I wonder, just the gamesmanship that Bielema does, I'm not worried about Toledo as far as the team being ready. They called them MAC champs. They're going into that game, and I don't think they will take them lightly. I think they know if they don't play well, they could lose to Toledo. The second game, don't be shocked if that Monday press conference, Bret Bielema, one of the first things he says is, well, here we are. We're 1-0, just like last year. Friday night game for game 2, just like last year.
Yep.
We know what happened in Bloomington.
Yep.
Watch him turn that Bloomington disappointment into, oh, we know what happened, and it's not going to happen again. And if they happen to capitalize on that going 2-0 into Penn State, wow. 2-1, though, we're feeling good no matter what. Second 3 games, Florida Atlantic at home.
Yeah.
Then you have, let's see, is it Nebraska?
I believe, yeah.
No, there's one before that. I'm sorry. It's Florida Atlantic at home.
Yep.
Purdu primetime on the road.
That's right, the 30th, right?
And then Nebraska for another Friday night game. That one's at home.
I'm excited about Purdue. I think we're going to go. I was talking about that with my parents.
You're going to go to it?
I think so, because I haven't, as big of an Illini fan as I've been, I haven't been to that many away football games, granted, until last year. Why the heck would I drive?
I haven't.
It
never tends to work out.
It's so
well.
close. And
it's 90 minutes.
Yeah, there's going to be storylines, so I think I'm going to go to that. I think you beat Florida Atlantic, obviously, hopefully. Don't even really want to bring it up. And you play them in football and basketball this year. Kind of interesting.
That's right.
The basketball one should be a little bit more dicey, but we'll save that for a few months down the road. You should beat Purdue, right? I mean, if there was no storylines there and I was just looking at it like on paper, Hudson Card, I mean, he's solid. There's a reason he got beat out at Texas.
Is he as dynamic as the first 2 quarterbacks?
And he's not surrounded by the amount of athletes that Texas has either. So
I'm more worried, and just in this day and age, I'm more worried about mobile quarterbacks, even with our good, even with our guys that I think can contain them. Hudson Card is more of a pro style, I believe. More of a drop back?
Yeah. He's more of a guy that like can run, but he's going to pick you up from the pocket. And then we said Nebraska's October 7th or whatever.
I think this is where I think if you start 2-1, you're starting 5-1.
I definitely think you can. I mean, Nebraska, you get them at home this year.
Yeah. I'd be a little more concerned if it's Matt Rule's first year. You get an energetic home crowd, and I was just happy, even with that bad Nebraska team last year, I was just happy to get out of there with the win. I just think that schedule sets up with two home games that I would be very surprised if they lost to Florida Atlantic or Nebraska.
Yeah.
And then, road game against Purdue. On the first time you see that, your natural reaction is, oh, God, really? Like, right. Of course, it's the primetime game, the narrative. Revenge game? Are you kidding me? I mean, that team, I got to think, for twofold. One, their former defensive coordinator. And that one might make it tricky, and I could see a first quarter of Purdue being really ugly as the team kind of reconciles their emotions, their former coaches over there on the sideline. But the other part of me says, okay, you've lost 2 years. For these veterans, 2 years in a row. Purdue kept you out of a bowl game, you could argue, 2 years ago, and they kept you out of Indy last year. I can't see... If you're in that locker room, you can't lose that game.
No.
They're going to circle that game more than any other on that schedule, I bet.
Yeah, probably so.
At least outwardly. In their minds, they're going to be most excited for Penn State, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But Purdue, that's the one they haven't slayed yet. They already beat Penn State 2 years ago.
Yeah, and I'm sure Bielema, it might be obvious. I don't think he would go out. He wouldn't say anything that would become like bulletin board material, but I'm sure like in-house and stuff, he's got some good things to say. Good things to say to motivate a team that got beat by Purdue the past couple of years, and then the defensive coordinator left for Purdue. That game I'm more, I guess, I feel like we're going to win. I'm more fearful for it because you think about, like, oh, crap, if we lost at Purdue, like, that would suck.
It would suck so much.
Versus, like, at
I don't want to do that.
At Kansas, I mean, that would suck.
That'd be annoying.
But I understand it. Penn State, I understand it. Nebraska, again, like, I've heard you say people always assume that first year things are going to work out, but I don't think Nebraska's got a bunch of new guys, got some transfers and stuff. I think that's a game Bielema should take care of at home.
Mm-hmm.
I like the second 3 games obviously a lot more than the
It's a nice
first 3
stretch.
games. So hopefully it's more of like what you said. You feel good at the beginning, this is just building momentum, games 4, 5, and 6, and less of like crap. You start off 1 and 2. You got to get those 3 games back. Which I feel more confident about now after last year. You played so well. October was your best football, so hopefully October picks things up, and then going into 7, 8, 9, you're feeling pretty good.
Thing is, 7, 8, 9 is, I think, this will tell the tale. And I don't want to say tell the tale. You can really, by starting 5 and 1, and I don't think that's ridiculous to think that could happen. If you want to go 4 and 2 and factor in another loss, that's totally fine, and you're still in a good spot. 3 and 3, I think you start sweating a little bit because 7, 8, and 9 at Maryland's the first one. I'm going to let you know right now, we're losing that game. It's just one of those you look at and you think, I don't know much. I know they got a good quarterback.
Yeah.
Mike Loxley's okay. They win 7 games a year there. You weren't winning it. It just screams to me loss.
That's one of those teams, like, since we don't play them that much and, like, they're a basketball school and they're in the East, I almost forget that they play football in the Big Ten.
I know.
Because you don't play them, and it's just their field is like,
the funky end zones. With
Yeah.
You lose. Do we agree in a weird way that we lose that game?
So then you'd be what, 5 and 3,
5 and
or
2,
5 and 2 if
I just think every season has a that's a stupid loss, and the Maryland one, which would not even be a bad loss, they'll probably be favored.
people are high on them. Yeah.
Yeah, they're picked
Decently
4th in the
high.
Big Ten East.
Yeah, I would say that's probably a loss.
Then you come home against Wisconsin, and then you go on the road to Minnesota. I think the home game against Wisconsin is the most winnable game in that 3-game stretch.
Yeah, that's huge.
Despite our success against Minnesota.
Yeah.
I think it's okay, as I sit here and try to be fair and not too rose-colored glasses, I think 1 and 2 in that stretch.
Yeah, and I'm totally okay. I say I'm okay with it. Like, maybe ask me after the Minnesota game, but I'm okay with it if you lose competitively and it's not like the offense scores 3 points and you can't do anything or something super frustrating like that. So yeah, I would agree. I'm okay with that. Then you're what, 6 and 3?
Now you could go 3-0.
Yeah,
You could go
8
0-3.
and 1,
That
yeah.
3-game stretch to me has the most variance.
If you get to a bowl game, I don't really care. Like, if you got to 6 and 3, but you didn't, you went 1 and 2 in that stretch. Like, I'm totally fine.
Well, because then you end with this. This is where the last 3.
Yeah.
The second 3 and the final 3 set you up really well. Indiana at home.
Yeah, you'd think.
They're terrible.
Yeah, that should be
Sorry.
automatic. Yeah.
At Iowa. Okay, now we sit here, and I understand the inclination to say you aren't going to win that game, but I think the key for me is not about winning or losing that game, at least not at the moment. It's be in a position to make that game matter, and I think we very well could be in that. So I like Indiana the week before, at Iowa, and then you close with David Braun's Western team.
Hopefully it's not like, I hope that's like not terrible weather and raining, obviously, even though it always feels like
You'll
it is.
smoke 'em.
So you can, you could at least
Yeah.
get some people out there.
There's
like,
been some decent Thanksgiving weekends.
yeah.
you know?
Was last week or was last year against Northwestern?
Last year was fun. I mean, I recall
Yeah.
last year that was Ohio State and Michigan,
That's right.
and I was doing yard work,
It
and it
was
was like
nice.
45 and
Yeah.
sunny. I mean, it was pretty good.
nice.
And then watching the Indiana-Purdue game, thinking, come on. And of course, Indiana's mobile quarterback went down.
Yeah,
He was their
Bazelak
one
or
shot.
whatever.
But
Yeah.
so not Bazelak, it was this random guy they put in that just was running up and down the field, and then he couldn't throw worth a lick. But he was a mobile quarterback that gave them this spark, and then he got hurt. And I don't know if he's going to be their guy this year or not. But
Yeah, I remember being mad because I just assumed that Indiana had no chance, so I like turned it off or something.
and they took a
but-
lead at one point. I
Yes,
thought,
that's
oh boy,
right.
oh boy.
That's right.
But okay, so as we calculate all that, if
Yeah.
we say 2 and 1, and then 3 and 0, and then 1 and 2 and 2 and 1, and here's the thing: of course, results may vary, and there's going to be things we can't predict, and that's, I mean, last year we would not have predicted. I think I might have said 7 and 5. I said 7 and 5. 8 and 4 wouldn't have shocked me, but the path to 8 and 4 would have shocked me.
Yes, 100%.
So with that in mind, I keep coming back to 8 and 4.
Yeah.
And I would be ecstatic
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
with 8 and 4. I don't need. Here's the thing, I don't need Indy in the same way that 2 years ago, I needed them to win a Big Ten title. all year we were just, please, for the love of God, win the title.
Yeah.
And when they did, it was half relief and half jubilation. It was both. I truly don't need Indy. And now, if we start 6-0, I'm singing a different tune. We damn well
Yeah.
better make Indy.
Yeah.
But as I sit here today, I just want a good team that wins 7-8 games a year. I'm still in that mindset.
I think competitive is the most important thing. There was nothing worse than just getting whooped every game, like most of my life.
I don't know if we have to worry about that. I think that is one page we could safely say we've probably turned since the Wisconsin game 2 years ago.
There's been a couple. Yeah, there's really only been a couple games since Bielema's been here that have been
Virginia
like that.
and
So,
Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, I would say I would be disappointed with 5-7. Go 6-6. You're competitive in the 6 losses. You go to some random bowl game. I'm fine because
Pinstripe Bowl.
yeah, it's about stacking bowls, right? And it's about just
It
stacking prime time. People are getting together for the holidays, and Illinois is playing Boston College or
It
something.
matters.
Like, it does. So, and if you go 5-7, you just take yourself for another 12 months out of any sort of spotlight or community. Like, if you go less than 6-6, you're gonna lose probably a majority of the people that jumped on the train last year. So I think going 6-6 is the floor. Like, that's what you have to do to keep this thing going. I think 7-5 is most likely gonna happen. And if Luke Altmaier is what we hope he is, I think 8-4 is definitely a possibility. I don't see, just with the amount of guys you're losing, it's so hard to say that you're gonna beat your win total from last year. And because the schedule is it's the Big Ten West. It's not that difficult.
Speaking of which, who's winning the Big Ten West?
It's crazy because everybody thinks it's gonna be Wisconsin or Iowa, right?
I don't think it's gonna be Wisconsin.
I don't. Yeah, and no, exactly. Wisconsin, like, they lost a lot. They have a lot of guys coming in, but
Luke Fickell will do well up there. But it's not something where he inherited an absolute treasure trove of talent.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a long time coming for Wisconsin. They were
Yeah.
able to coast on good line play for a while. And I just don't know. He brought in a lot, certainly a quarterback especially, but I don't see that being some immediate 10-2 reclamation project.
I think it's going to be Iowa. I think because they almost were able to win it last year with the worst offense anybody's ever seen. And now they've got McNamara and a couple other pieces. They picked up that dude, I think Brown or something, the wide receiver from Ohio State. Like, they can't be worse, right? Their offense
wouldn't think.
Their offense can only go in the forward direction.
And their offense will not be worse.
Yeah, and their
no.
defense is supposed to be pretty much just as good, maybe drop off a little bit. I mean, they lost Jack Campbell and a couple other guys, but I would give it. That's just a safe pick because
it's a safe pick, but with reasons behind it.
Yes.
So who would be your second favorite then? And this is where I start thinking,
yeah. I mean, Minnesota's not fun to pick. I know they lost Ibrahim. They've got some guys coming back, just from what I remember listening to when Jeremy interviewed the Minnesota reporter. But that's where it would be juicy to put Illinois right there. I mean, yes, there's a far chance they could win it, but everybody this year is going to say, like, this has to be our year to win the West because the West is not going to exist anymore.
That's true. That's going to be on everyone's mind.
I do think if the cards fall, I do think you can end up in Indy, but then I do think there's a possibility. I think your floor would be 4th, maybe 5th. Like, I don't know who else would take
Nebraska or Purdue, but
Yeah.
Purdue has a lot to replace.
Yeah.
Walters may work well as a head coach. He's going to have a long career, a successful career in football, but this being his first gig in his first year. And I don't want to sleep on how good Jeff Brom was, because I really do think that he was a very good
especially
coach.
Offensively.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, we would be happy with 7-5.
Yes, 100%.
We'd be even happier with 8-4. We don't need more than 8-4.
Mm-hmm.
But if we did, then we go from very happy to ecstatic.
100%.
And if we have to book another flight for Florida, so be it.
It did. I would be. So we had the rough first year, rough. Like, you still won a couple of big games, 5-7. Then last year was obviously a ton of fun.
But nothing that made you think they were going to have a great year too.
No.
Yeah.
But the way the year ended, I would say put a little damper on the offseason. So I would be very happy going 7-5 if you end up 3-0, like in the last stretch or something, and then you win the bowl game. Whatever.
Feel some
maybe.
momentum.
Yeah. So
yeah, if you finish 8-5,
yes,
after a 7-5 regular season, but you finish strong and you win the bowl game, yeah, that actually does have a different kind of glow, because you think, wow, they did all that despite losing the number 5 pick and 3 of their secondary, new quarterback. that I think would tell a lot of people this thing has sustained potential.
I just think the community, like I've only lived here in Champaign now for a few years, but just working for the university last year and like the hype and you could just feel it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like that when you beat Minnesota, especially, and you're 7-1.
One of the best. I know this sounds ridiculous. It was one of the best days of my life.
It was awesome.
I mean, homecoming tailgates are always big for me and my group of friends and my family and all that. We had the biggest group of the year. It was perfect weather.
Yep, beautiful.
A golden fall day.
Yep.
And after we went down, you actually stopped by and said
I ran
hi.
into you. That's right.
Right after
yeah,
we were trailing.
right.
And then, good luck token, we just ran it the rest of the way and just smoked them. Truly, and that I think speaks to, and you know this, a good football team, it just enhances the fall, which is already the best time of year anyways.
Oh, yeah.
I love football even when my teams suck, but when they're good, I can't – the weeks go by, and all week long I'm thinking about the next game, the next tailgate.
Right.
Yeah.
It makes your Sundays better and makes the rest of the week you got the nice weather outside and the leaves are falling. It's making you think about how you were tailgating, this and this and that. So
chill in the morning.
Yeah. It's
and you'll be able to tailgate this year.
I know. I'm pumped.
Yeah.
We got, what, like 30 days? A little bit less?
I mean, it's 3 weeks from Saturday.
Yeah.
So you're looking at 20 from when we record this. You're looking at 26 days, 25.
I'll ask you a question to end it here. How many years away do we have to get? Because Bielema's built up my trust, and I feel a lot better. But it really wouldn't take that much for me to go backwards and be like, crap, I don't trust anything in Illinois.
Get it.
Like, we're gonna lose. Like, how many years do you need to see it before you're like, maybe we do lose to Toledo in the first game of the year? You know what I mean?
Meaning, how many years would that have to happen for me to be okay with that?
No, how many years in a row would that have to happen where you wouldn't even be thinking going into week 1 that
I
we might
see.
lose to Toledo?
I'm honestly, for me to basically, you're asking to get to a level of comfort where I'm not worried about the rug being pulled out from under me.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 more years.
Yeah.
And not much.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. If they win 7 or 8 this year, and this is what would be interesting if they would have won 6 or 7 that first year, because now we're thinking, what, you're talking 3 straight bowl games in 3 years here, but 2 out of 3 ain't bad. 2 in a row is really good. And if they were to do that again, just follow it up. And to the point where one day I'd love to look back in a media guide, and I remember doing this with football and seeing, man, John Makovic, all that guy did was make bowl games, and he won 1 Big Ten title.
Yeah.
1 Big Ten title in 4 years, that's really good. 8, 9 wins. And then he went to Texas. And I was like, God, I just want to make bowl games. That's really it. And to get to the level where our disappointment becomes 6-6, we're going to frickin' not Detroit even, but whatever it may be. I do think that I only probably need, if they have a good year this year and a good year next year, I'm not worried about anything. And the thing is, I don't know if I would get to a point, and it'd be a great question to ask me 5 years if we ever get to this really high level, but I don't think I'll get to a point where I'd be disappointed with 8 wins.
No.
To me, the football thing I never need to talk about college football playoff or national championship. I don't need banners like I do with basketball. For me, the experiential thing of the home tailgates and the friends and the family and the communal aspect of being in Memorial Stadium, which is still one of my favorite places to be, I just need them to be good. That's really it. Just be good.
I like that like kind of, it's just like Iowa, Wisconsin. They were constantly 8-9 wins, and then occasionally they would host number 5 Penn State at home and beat them, and it's just like this electric. That's what we need right there.
Knowing you have the occasional big moments, and I will say that the reason that Penn State game is particularly interesting is as fun as Iowa was last year, and as fun as Minnesota was last year. I don't think either of those teams were ranked at the time.
I don't think so, no.
So when it comes to the big marquee home win that really establishes a program, I know Bielema in his heart of hearts is thinking, okay, if we can start 2-0, that Penn State game can be big for this whole thing.
Yeah.
And he's going to try to downplay with his players so they don't get – there is such a thing as being too excited.
100%.
And I could see that, but – it's nice to. I mean, look at us. We always run long, and that's okay. But would we have done that 2 years ago with the first Bielema?
Oh no, yeah.
It's the excitement. It's bubbling.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time, man.
Awesome.
Good to see you. You're back.
I know it's so
great.
good to be back and talking Illinois, and especially good because we're excited.
That's right.
Got a few weeks left. So, yeah.
Before we go, quick sponsors, DPDO online at dpdo.com for all the best deals and prices and custom calzones, any toppings you want, that's dpdo.com. Also, State Farm agent Brian Hansen online at brianismyguy.com for life, auto, home, business renters, you name it. Brian is my guy. He can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. We also have Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, 217-841-4728. Schedule your furnace check for the fall. Coming up soon. That's 217-841-4728 for Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. And finally, Owen Builders, online at owenbuildersllc.com for your home additions, porches, decks. Go online to owenbuildersllc.com to check out their gallery of all the projects they can do for your home. Champagne Showers Podcast Network, Isaac Ambrose, back in the flesh, in the studio. We'll do some more of these as the season goes on here, and we will be back next week. So in the meantime, take care, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you soon. It is the 200 level.
Sweet.
Thanks, YouTubers.
Oh, yeah.
No one's laughing.